The night was consumed by a storm of chaos. The Nine Tails, a colossal beast of unimaginable power, rampaged through Konoha. Buildings crumbled, and the earth trembled as the beast's claws tore through the village. The air was thick with the sound of destruction, the roars of Kurama reverberating like thunder. Amidst the madness, Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, stood at the heart of the village with his wife, Kushina Uzumaki, preparing for the ultimate sacrifice. Kushina, who had given birth to a child just hours earlier, struggled to maintain control over her body. The curse of the Nine Tails had been passed to her child, the newborn Naruto, as the villagers still whispered in hushed tones about the future of the child they had come to dread. The lives of many depended on a desperate plan to seal the beast away, but it would come at a heavy cost. Minato, Kushina whispered, weak from the birth and the effects of Kurama's chakra, promise me you'll protect him. No matter what. I will, Kushina, Minato said, his voice firm but filled with sorrow. He touched his newborn son's forehead softly, knowing that this moment would forever change the boy's life. You are my son. Never forget that. With great determination, Minato and Kushina initiated the sealing process, intending to use the Reaper Death Seal to separate Kurama's chakra and soul. However, unbeknownst to them, something far greater than they anticipated was stirring within the deep recesses of their son's bloodline, a power that was not of this world, nor of any that they could imagine. The Uzumaki clan, long known for their powerful seals and affinity with ancient forces, had a forgotten ritual, one that linked a chosen individual to an entity of divine strength, a being of immense adaptability, destruction, and unyielding will. This entity was Mahoraga, the eight-handed sword divergent seal, a divine general, a legendary being sealed long ago by the ancestors of the Uzumaki. In that moment of crisis, as Minato poured his chakra into the seal and Kushina struggled against the overwhelming weight of Kurama's chakra, the ritual activated, binding Naruto to Mahoraga. The essence of Mahoraga surged through the boy's veins, intertwining with the Nine Tails chakra and bending it to its will. The neutralizing power of Mahoraga. As Kurama's chakra collided with Mahoraga's power, something extraordinary happened. Mahoraga, known for its ability to adapt and evolve through any situation, instantly adjusted to the massive, raw power of the Nine Tails. Where Kurama's malice, rage, and destructive intent had once poisoned the world, Mahoraga's divine influence absorbed it all. Kurama's strength, once uncontrollable and destructive, was now muted, neutralized by the unrelenting will of Mahoraga. The villagers, witnessing the battle between the monstrous beast and the unforeseen divine power that radiated from Naruto, could not fathom what had just occurred. Kurama, once a being capable of reducing entire villages to ashes, was now rendered powerless, its malevolent energy tempered by the divine force now residing within Naruto. But the villagers did not understand. To them, Naruto was not a child saved by an ancient and forgotten power. He was a monstrous being, the vessel of both a demon fox and a strange, unexplainable force. Fear gripped their hearts, and in that fear, hatred blossomed. The villagers' fear. Naruto's birth did not bring joy. It brought terror. As the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, arrived on the scene, overseeing the aftermath of the battle, he could only look upon the child with trepidation. The village had been saved, but at what cost? The Nine Tails had been sealed within Naruto, but the presence of Mahoraga left even Hiruzen questioning the boy's future. The villagers, in their panic and confusion, could not see the boy as anything but a demon. They saw him as the source of the destruction, the harbinger of calamity. As rumors spread, fueled by ignorance and fear, Naruto was branded with a new name, the Demon Child. Despite the overwhelming malice directed at him, Hiruzen swore to protect Naruto, just as Minato had done. But the old Hokage, wise and seasoned, knew that even he did not fully understand what Mahoraga's influence would mean for the boy's future. Naruto's chakra, shaped by the divine entity within him, adapted to every challenge, every obstacle. His body would never be the same, and his soul, too, would change. The power of Mahoraga did not simply give him strength, it reshaped him, molding him into something far beyond what any normal human could ever be. For now, Naruto would grow up isolated, rejected by the villagers who feared him. The absence of love and support would drive him further into the depths of his own mind, where he would begin to learn how to wield the terrible power within him. But deep within, there was an unyielding force, an adaptation that would never allow him to be defeated. Mahoraga had shaped him into an unbreakable vessel. And as Naruto grew, so would the divine power within him. Years passed, and Naruto's life was one of solitude and pain. The villagers turned their backs on him, their hatred seething beneath every glance. His parents were gone, and the Hokage's protection could only go so far when it came to the cruelty of those who blamed him for the Nine Tails attack. Still, there was something in Naruto that refused to yield. The divine power within him, Mahoraga's influence, adapted to every hardship, every insult, and every failure. And with each trial, it grew stronger, more capable of shaping the world around him. As the villagers' hatred intensified, Hiruzen's concern deepened. What would happen when Naruto finally unlocked the full extent of Mahoraga's power? Could the boy ever overcome the shadows of his past, or would the power within him consume everything in its path? In the darkness of the Hokage's office, Hiruzen looked upon the young boy, already showing signs of something far beyond a typical child. His future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the story of Naruto Uzumaki had only just begun. From the moment Naruto Uzumaki took his first steps, the village of Konoha had already written him off. He was no longer just the son of the fourth Hokage or the child who bore the burden of the Nine Tails. No, in the eyes of the villagers, he was something far worse. He was the demon child, the vessel of a terrifying force, and a constant reminder of the destruction Kurama had wrought. The streets of Konoha were cold, and the air thick with fear whenever Naruto walked through them. Wherever he went, people crossed the street, muttered insults behind his back, or outright ignored him as if he were a ghost. The whispers never stopped: demon, monster, curse words that clung to him like a second skin. Yet, despite the hatred and the rejection, something remarkable happened. In a town where everyone feared the Nine Tails, where even a glance could send a grown man into a frenzy, Naruto was untouched by the attacks meant to harm him. It didn't matter if a group of children cornered him with rocks in their hands or if a desperate villager tried to stab him in a dark alley, nothing ever seemed to touch him. When one child aimed a rock at Naruto's head with enough force to split stone, Naruto's eyes never even flinched. As the rock neared, it simply dissolved mid-air, absorbed by the unseen force surrounding him. When a kunai was thrown from behind by an angry civilian, intent on ending his life, it halted mid-flight, an invisible barrier warping reality itself to protect the boy. The adaptation of Mahoraga. Naruto's survival wasn't by chance. Mahoraga, the divine force within him, had already begun its work, constantly adapting to everything that came his way. Each time Naruto faced harm, Mahoraga adjusted, learning from each encounter and neutralizing the threat. Poison, weapons, chakra-based assaults, they were nothing. Every attack was met with an immediate response from the divine being now entwined with his very being, rendering the assaults useless. When Naruto had first felt the sharp sting of a kunai to his arm, he had expected the worst. But the wound healed within moments, and the weapon clattered harmlessly to the ground. When an enraged villager tried to use chakra-based attacks to incapacitate him, the energy was absorbed by his body as though it had never existed, leaving him untouched. Even the worst kinds of poison failed to leave a mark on his skin. Naruto, however, didn't understand why. He didn't know why the kunai hadn't hurt or why the poison didn't affect him. He only knew that when people tried to harm him, they failed. His body, perhaps through some unknown miracle, was unharmed, and in his mind, he had become invincible. But the truth of it all, the full extent of Mahoraga's power, remained a mystery. He didn't yet comprehend the vastness of the being within him. It was as if a part of him knew that he was destined for something far greater, but the loneliness, the rejection, and the years of suffering clouded his understanding. The loneliness and hardening of Naruto's heart. In school, Naruto was a pariah. Every day, the children would mock him, call him names, and refuse to work with him in class projects. The adults would glance away as he walked by, their faces cold with disdain. He was left alone in the playground, watching from the edges as other children played together, their laughter ringing in his ears like a bitter reminder of the world he could never be a part of. But Naruto never cried. Not anymore. He had tried, once, to ask for their kindness, to ask why they hated him, but every attempt had been met with rejection or worse. His heart hardened with each passing year, every blow dealt by the villagers, every insult hurled his way. The pain was numbing, but it only served to sharpen his resolve. He had no friends. No family. No hope. He learned quickly that strength was the only thing that mattered. The power he didn't yet understand became his sanctuary, and the resilience he built through years of loneliness became his shield. He felt invincible, untouchable. Every time someone tried to hurt him, the failed attack felt like proof of his invulnerability. And yet, deep down, a gnawing emptiness lingered, a hunger for connection, for someone to see him as more than just a monster. Naruto wandered the streets late at night, his hands shoved into his pockets as he stared at the dark sky above. He couldn't remember the warmth of a loving embrace, nor could he remember what it felt like to laugh with others without fear. Sometimes, he would look up at the Hokage monument, staring at the faces of the past leaders of the village, wondering if his father had known how cruel the world would be to him. He never had the chance to ask. He didn't know what was worse, the fact that people feared him or the fact that they didn't even care to understand who he was. The only thing they saw was a demon, and that thought made him wonder, am I really a demon? But no matter how many times those thoughts plagued his mind, no matter how many times he felt the sting of rejection, one thing remained unshakable: Naruto would never bend. He would never show weakness. The adaptation of Mahoraga was there, a silent presence within, pushing him to survive, to thrive in an unforgiving world. And as each year passed, that power only grew stronger. The villagers' hatred only served to fuel his loneliness, but also his drive to become something more. They wanted to see him broken. They wanted to see him suffer. Naruto clenched his fists. They'll see. They'll see me as more than just a monster. And so, the demon child of Konoha would walk a path of solitude, his heart hardened and his power growing, for the world had yet to realize that he was no longer just a boy. It was only a matter of time before they saw him for what he truly was, a force beyond their reckoning. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the Konoha Academy's training grounds. The sound of sparring filled the air, the clash of kunai and the buzz of chakra-infused attacks echoing in the distance. It was another typical day at the academy except for one very important detail: Naruto Uzumaki was once again the target of the other students' cruel taunts and bullying. Naruto was at the center of the training area, surrounded by a group of his classmates who looked at him with disdain. Today, as usual, they had decided to make him their punching bag, but this time, there was something different in the air, a palpable tension that made Naruto feel like something was about to change. He stood tall, fists clenched, trying to appear defiant, but his heart raced in his chest, as if a storm was building inside him. What's wrong, Naruto? Scared? One of the boys sneered, his voice dripping with venom. It was Ryaji, the loudest of the bullies. You're just a demon, aren't you? You'll never be a real ninja. The other children snickered, their cruel laughter filling the air as Ryaji stepped forward. Without warning, he tossed a kunai toward Naruto's face. Naruto stood still, his eyes narrowing. He didn't flinch. He never did anymore. The kunai sliced through the air, but just as it was about to strike him, something strange happened. Time seemed to slow down, and an invisible force around Naruto shimmered like a rippling distortion in the very fabric of space itself. The Konoha stopped, mid-air, hovering in front of Naruto's face. It was as if the weapon had encountered an invisible barrier, one that neutralized its trajectory and brought it to a halt. Naruto blinked in confusion. He hadn't done anything to stop it, not consciously. He didn't even know how to react. Before he could process what had just happened, another barrage of shuriken flew toward him, aiming for his chest. This time, the air seemed to crackle, and the spinning blades were met with the same invisible force. The shuriken disintegrated into nothingness before they could even come close to him, as if they'd never existed. The students watching froze. The laughter died on their lips as they stared, wide-eyed, at Naruto. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. But then, just as quickly as it had started, the disturbance stopped. The air returned to normal, and Naruto's eyes widened in realization. He had done nothing. He hadn't used a jutsu, hadn't activated any chakra, yet all of their attacks had simply vanished. Before Naruto could even speak, Ryaji, stunned but still eager to assert his dominance, rushed forward with a fierce chakra-charged punch. The ground cracked beneath his feet as he thrust his fist toward Naruto's face, determined to knock him out and show everyone who was in charge. But as Ryaji's fist came within inches of Naruto's jaw, something far more ominous began to unfold. From within Naruto's body, a subtle yet unmistakable hum filled the air. Something stirred deep within him, a force so old and incomprehensible that even Naruto, in his state of confusion, could feel it stretching outward, like a living, breathing thing. And then it manifested. A strange, ethereal will appeared in the air before Naruto. It spun slowly at first, an ancient symbol etched into its surface, the marks glowing with an intense, shifting energy. It resembled a gear or a wheel, but its power radiated an otherworldly presence. The will spun faster and faster as Ryaji's punch drew near, and without warning, the attack was neutralized. Ryaji's fist, now just an inch from Naruto's face, halted mid-air, as if the very space around it had warped. It was as if the punch had never existed. Ryaji's expression morphed from confidence to disbelief as his chakra-charged punch slowly reversed, the energy dissipating harmlessly into the air. The will of power continued to spin, its motion smooth and unstoppable, its presence absolute. The attacks of Ryaji and the others were completely absorbed, neutralized, and rendered meaningless as they collided with this invisible force. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, the will vanished, its energy fading like a dying star. Naruto stood motionless, his eyes locked on where the will had been, his body still humming with an energy he couldn't comprehend. He had no idea what had just happened. All he knew was that, somehow, he had been protected. The invisible force, whatever it was, had reacted on its own, and the bullies who'd once terrorized him now stood in stunned silence. Ryaji stumbled back, his expression pale as he stared at his clenched, still trembling fist. What the hell was that? He muttered under his breath. Naruto took a step back, uncertain of what he had just witnessed or what had happened to his own body. His heart was still pounding in his chest, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. He had never experienced anything like this before. Was it his chakra? Was it something else? Naruto. A voice called softly from behind him. It was Iruka, his academy instructor. The man's face, usually filled with patience, now held a flicker of concern as he regarded Naruto. He had witnessed everything from the sidelines, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Are you all right?" Iruka asked, though it was clear that he wasn't just asking about the physical harm. Something was different about Naruto, something beyond the usual fear and hatred the villagers felt for him. Naruto nodded awkwardly, his mind still racing to make sense of what had just happened. He wasn't sure how to explain it. How could he? How could he even begin to describe the way his body had acted on its own, how the attacks had just failed? Yeah, I'm fine," Naruto replied, his voice shaky but trying to mask the confusion. Iruka didn't seem entirely convinced. He could feel it, too, the shift in the air, the subtle disturbance in Naruto's presence. It wasn't just chakra. Something more dangerous was at play here. Iruka's suspicion grew. This wasn't just about Naruto being the Nine Tails host. Something had changed. Something more. Whatever force had intervened during the fight, it wasn't just a random event, it was deliberate. And it was far more than anything Naruto had ever been told. The will had been Mahoraga's first visible manifestation. As Iruka glanced toward Naruto, concern etched into his features, a chill ran down his spine. He couldn't help but wonder, what exactly is Naruto, and what kind of power is inside him? But for now, he could only watch, helplessly, as the boy who had once been considered a pariah now stood before him with an aura of untold strength that, if left unchecked, could change everything. The moon hung high over the village of Konoha, casting its pale light upon the trees and rooftops. The night was eerily quiet, the calmness only broken by the distant chirping of crickets. But deep within the academy, a different kind of silence reigned, one filled with anticipation and the adrenaline of forbidden action. Naruto Uzumaki, eyes narrowed and heart pounding, crept through the darkened hallways of the academy. He had heard rumors, whispers about the Forbidden Scroll, the very scroll that contained the secrets of jutsu forbidden by the village for being too dangerous. His curiosity had gotten the better of him. He wanted to prove something. He wanted to prove that he was capable of more than just being the pariah, the demon. But the scroll wasn't just about power. Naruto didn't understand that part yet. He was driven by an unshakable need to gain strength, to show the world that he could be something more, something greater. As he entered the locked room where the Forbidden Scroll was kept, Naruto's hands trembled. The old scroll lay there in its wooden case, practically calling to him. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed it and unfurled its contents, running his fingers over the mysterious symbols written within. His chakra flared with excitement, eager to learn and master the forbidden techniques. But Naruto wasn't alone. From the shadows, a figure emerged, Mizuki, the academy instructor who had always acted as a mentor, though Naruto had never fully trusted him. Mizuki's smile was crooked, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous malice. "So, you found it, huh?" Mizuki's voice was soft, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "You've been curious about the Forbidden Scroll, Naruto?" "I should have known." Naruto froze, the weight of the scroll in his hand suddenly feeling far heavier. "Mizuki? What are you doing here?" Mizuki stepped forward, his expression one of mock sympathy. "I should have told you the truth a long time ago, Naruto," he said, his tone now dark and foreboding. "But you deserve to know. You see, the reason the villagers hate you, the reason they treat you like a monster, is because of the Nine Tails." Naruto's blood ran cold at the mention of the beast sealed inside him, but Mizuki wasn't done. "You're nothing but a vessel, a container for that demon. You will never be accepted here, never be anything more than a weapon," Mizuki continued, his words laced with venom. "That's why you're alone. That's why the villagers fear and hate you. You're a weapon, nothing more. They'll never see you as a human." The truth struck Naruto like a physical blow. His entire life had been defined by the hatred of the villagers, but he had never truly understood why. Hearing Mizuki say it so plainly felt like a punch to the gut, but it was a punch Naruto wasn't going to take lying down. His fingers tightened around the Forbidden Scroll, a surge of anger flaring up inside him. How could they all hate him for something he couldn't control? How could they see him as nothing but a monster when all he wanted was to be recognized as someone capable of greatness? But then, just as the anger began to boil over, Naruto felt something else stir deep within him. It was more than just rage. It was a hunger, an ancient, primal hunger that had been waiting, coiled inside him, for just the right moment. Mahoraga. the divine power that had been silently adapting to the world around him stirred and awakened within Naruto. The force that had long been lying dormant began to grow, pushing against the confines of Naruto's mind. The ancient power of Mahoraga rose like a tidal wave, filling Naruto with an overwhelming sense of purpose. It was not just a response to Mizuki's taunts, it was a call to action. Naruto's eyes glowed with an intensity Mizuki hadn't anticipated. The air around him began to shimmer and warp as the power of Mahoraga made its first true appearance. The will of adaptation. Suddenly, without warning, Naruto's body was surrounded by an invisible presence. The air around him rippled like the surface of water disturbed by a stone. And then, out of nowhere, a massive will, a symbol of divine power, manifested before him. It spun slowly at first, but with each passing second, the will gained speed. The energy was pure, overwhelming, and ancient. Mizuki's smirk faltered. His eyes widened in alarm as he felt an unnatural pressure begin to suffocate the space around him. What is this? Mizuki stammered, taking a step back. Naruto's face remained unchanged, his expression cold and detached. The power within him was rising, and it was no longer just about defending himself, it was about destroying the threat before him. Mizuki, sensing that something was terribly wrong, activated a jutsu. Shadow Clone Jutsu. He shouted, sending a dozen clones charging at Naruto, all of them armed and ready to strike. The clones leaped toward Naruto, their weapons raised, their chakra infused with intent to subdue him. But the moment they reached Naruto, the will of Mahoraga spun faster, until the air around him cracked like thunder. The clones' chakra was immediately nullified. Their attacks were absorbed by the invisible force, and their bodies froze in mid-air, before disintegrating into nothingness. Mizuki's eyes widened in horror as he watched his clones vanish without a trace. His heart raced. He couldn't understand it. What was happening? What kind of jutsu was this? Panicking, Mizuki formed a series of hand seals, channeling his chakra into one final, desperate move. Fire style, fireball jutsu. He roared, sending a massive fireball spiraling toward Naruto. But the moment the flames reached Naruto, they, too, were met with the power of Mahoraga. The fireball was snuffed out before it could even reach him. The heat vanished, the flames dissipating as if they had never existed. The will of Mahoraga spun once more, adapting to the fire and rendering it useless. Mizuki, trembling with fear, realized that he was dealing with something far beyond his comprehension. But his pride wouldn't let him retreat. You think you're invincible, don't you, Naruto? He sneered, charging toward him with the kunai raised, aiming for Naruto's throat. The moment Mizuki reached him, a powerful force surged through Naruto's body, his own rage mingling with Mahoraga's divine will. Before Mizuki could even strike, Naruto's fist collided with his chest with inhuman force. The crushing blow. There was no time to react. Mizuki's body was flung backward like a rag doll, crashing into a nearby tree with a sickening thud. The sound of bones cracking echoed through the night air. Naruto stood there, panting lightly, his eyes glowing with the cold fire of Mahoraga's power. Mizuki lay on the ground, blood oozing from his mouth, his body broken, gasping for air. His once proud form was reduced to a crumpled heap of flesh and bone. Why you're not human. Mizuki wheezed, struggling to speak. Naruto stood over him, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He was breathing heavily, but there was no trace of fear in his eyes. There was only a deep, unshakable certainty. I'm untouchable. The power inside him, Mahoraga's divine force, had risen to the surface, and it was clear that nothing in this world could stand against it, not the villagers, not Mizuki, not anyone. He was no longer just the host of the Nine Tails. He was something far beyond that. He was something greater. With a cold, emotionless glance, Naruto turned away from the broken Mizuki and walked into the night. His destiny had just begun, and there was no turning back. Naruto sat at the edge of the training field, arms crossed and legs dangling off the side of the small stone platform. The morning sun bathed the village in a soft light, but the chill in the air did little to calm his restless energy. Despite his unmatched power, the feeling of being thrust into yet another situation beyond his control was an unsettling one. The Council of Elders had objected loudly, vehemently to Naruto's placement on a genin team. Their fears were not misplaced, for they knew what he was capable of, or at least what they thought he might become. The power of Mahoraga, already vast and incomprehensible to them, combined with the Nine Tails chakra, made Naruto an entity that the village's leadership couldn't predict or understand. Yet, despite their protests, the Hokage had made the decision. Naruto was going to be on Team 7. Sasuke Uchiha sat not far from him, barely acknowledging Naruto's presence. His dark eyes, as usual, were filled with a mixture of arrogance and brooding intensity. The Uchiha could never hide the jealousy burning within him, especially since Naruto's unnatural immunity to harm and his raw, untapped power had only served to stoke the flames of rivalry between them. Sasuke might have had the Sharingan, the blood of the Uchiha clan flowing in his veins, but he had always found himself just a little behind Naruto's natural strength, his ability to withstand every attack without so much as a scratch. And it irked him. Sakura Haruno, meanwhile, sat on the opposite end of the stone platform, her gaze flicking back and forth between Naruto and Sasuke. The girl, once dismissive of Naruto like the rest of the villagers, now found herself oddly unsettled by the sheer magnitude of his power. He wasn't just the Jinchuriki she had been taught to fear, he was something else, something far darker and dangerous. The way Mahoraga's presence seemed to warp the air around him, she could feel it, a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. She couldn't understand it, but she knew one thing for sure, she was wary of him. Kakashi Hatake, their new sensei, watched the trio from a distance, a hand thoughtfully resting on his chin. The laid-back attitude of the infamous copy ninja masked the sharpness of his mind. He had seen many talented shinobi in his time, but there was something about Naruto's power that made him uneasy. The boy was unpredictable. Kakashi had already witnessed firsthand how Mahoraga's adaptation was far more than a simple defense mechanism. It could counter chakra-based jutsu, weapons, poisons, and even more dangerous techniques. Kakashi had no illusions about what Naruto could do if he decided to unleash the full extent of that power. Kakashi made it a point to keep a close eye on Naruto. The boy's raw strength was undeniable, but Kakashi wasn't interested in the quantity of power a shinobi wielded, he was interested in the quality of their spirit. If Naruto's heart was as volatile as his power, he would be a danger to the village, no matter how many bells he could snatch. It was time for their first real test as a team, the bell test. Kakashi appeared before the trio in his usual laid-back manner, eyes smiling from behind his mask. "All right, Team 7, today is the day. I'm going to test your teamwork and determine if you're ready to be genin. You see, there are 2 bells here, and your objective is simple, you need to get those bells from me before noon. If you fail, well, then you're not ready for the job." The 3 of them stood in a loose formation, watching Kakashi carefully. Sakura, though anxious, was ready to prove herself. Sasuke, as usual, was all fire and competitiveness, itching for a challenge. But Naruto stood, arms folded, a bored expression on his face as Kakashi explained the rules. He was already tuning out Kakashi's words, already seeing the entire exercise for what it was, pointless. Teamwork. He didn't need teamwork. He could defeat Kakashi by himself, easily. He didn't need anyone to help him. Naruto's stance remained defiant, his eyes sharp with disdain for the test and for what he believed was a waste of his time. Sasuke narrowed his eyes, already irked by Naruto's attitude. "If you think you can do it alone, then prove it," Sasuke sneered, his fingers itching for a fight. Naruto turned to Sasuke, the faintest trace of a smirk tugging at his lips. "I don't need to prove anything to you, Sasuke," Naruto said, his voice cold and almost detached. His eyes gleamed with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. With no further words, Naruto sprang into action. In an instant, he vanished from view, his speed so fast that neither Sasuke nor Sakura could track him. Kakashi's eyes widened as he instinctively reached for his kunai. Naruto, fueled by his overwhelming power, charged at Kakashi. His movements were a blur, a display of raw speed and strength that Kakashi had never seen before. In a split second, Naruto appeared before Kakashi, landing a punch that shook the ground beneath them. But Kakashi was ready. With a single hand sign, Kakashi activated his Sharingan and used his Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique, creating a series of clones to confuse Naruto. But it didn't matter. Naruto's eyes glowed with an eerie light. The will of Mahoraga appeared once again, spinning rapidly, and Naruto's entire body adapted to Kakashi's clone trick. The clone's attacks were easily nullified by Mahoraga's power chakra was absorbed, weapons became useless, and even Kakashi's genjutsu was rendered ineffective. The battle was one-sided, and within moments, Kakashi found himself on the defensive, struggling to keep up with Naruto's relentless assault. But Kakashi wasn't foolish enough to believe that this was the end of it. He used his substitution jutsu just in time, swapping himself with the log as Naruto's punch slammed into the ground. The force of the blow cratered the earth, sending dirt and rocks flying into the air. Kakashi emerged from the smoke, his face now serious. He couldn't afford to hold back any longer. Sasuke, meanwhile, began to grow frustrated. Naruto wasn't just overpowering Kakashi, he was overwhelming him, humiliating him. His jealousy flared even higher. He wasn't about to let Naruto outshine him. "We've got to work together if we want to win," Sasuke snapped, turning to Sakura. "You're with me. We'll take him down as a team." Sakura, her nerves rattled by the sheer force of Naruto's power, hesitated for a moment. But when she saw the determination in Sasuke's eyes, she nodded, gripping her kunai tightly. The three of them, now working together, formed a plan to trap Kakashi. Sasuke distracted him with a series of well-timed fireballs while Sakura used her agility to position herself for a surprise attack. Meanwhile, Naruto simply bulldozed his way through the test. Using the combined forces of distraction, Naruto ambushed Kakashi once more, his speed and brute strength making it nearly impossible for Kakashi to react. The result was a successful trap. Kakashi, despite his strength, was caught off guard, his attention divided, and he couldn't escape. The bells were snatched from his belt as the three of them stood triumphantly. Kakashi, breathing hard, smiled behind his mask. "You passed." "Barely," he said, his tone softening. "But you did it? Congratulations." Naruto, still flushed with the heat of battle, looked Kakashi dead in the eye. "That was too easy," Naruto muttered, clearly not impressed. Kakashi stepped closer to Naruto, his smile fading. "Power doesn't make a shinobi, Naruto. If you think you're invincible, one day you'll face something even you can't adapt to. And when that happens, you'll be alone." Naruto met his sensei's gaze without flinching. "We'll see about that, Kakashi," he said, his voice unwavering. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Naruto's path was set. No one, not even Kakashi, would stop him. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a reddish-orange glow over the horizon as Team 7 made their way toward the land of waves. The mission seemed simple enough: escort the drunken and dismissive Tazuna, a bridge builder, back to his homeland. The route was supposed to be safe, but Naruto's instincts told him that things wouldn't be as easy as they appeared. Tazuna, an aging man with a heavy hand for alcohol, wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea of being accompanied by a demon. From the moment they met, he shot Naruto dirty looks, ignoring the boy's presence. It was a familiar routine for Naruto villagers and adults, dismissing him, fearing him, all because of the power that was forcibly sealed inside him. What Tajuna didn't realize, however, was that Naruto wasn't just a Jinchuriki anymore. His eyes had changed. There was something darker, colder in them now, a look that suggested he had been hardened by years of suffering. As the journey continued, Tajuna's cocky attitude shifted into one of wary suspicion. The more he observed Naruto, the more he couldn't help but notice the way the boy carried himself. He wasn't afraid of anything, not the weather, not the challenge ahead, and certainly not the harsh words or the dismissive attitude thrown his way. It was as if Naruto didn't care about anything or anyone. What unnerved him the most, however, was the way the boy shrugged off any potential threat. When a pack of bandits tried to ambush them on the road, Naruto simply stared at them coldly, his lips curled into a barely perceptible smirk. The bandits hesitated, sensing something off about the young boy, but it was too late. In a split second, Naruto's eyes flashed with an eerie light. The bandits launched a flurry of Konoha and shuriken toward the group, but they were no match for Mahoraga's adaptation will. The weapons were instantly nullified as Naruto's auras shifted, the spinning wheel absorbing the chakra-infused projectiles and rendering them useless. One bandit lunged at him with a blade, but Naruto merely sidestepped the attack and grabbed the man's arm, twisting it with brutal force. There was a sickening crack as the bones shattered, and the bandit screamed in agony. Sasuke watched from the side, his jaw tightening. The Uchiha had always believed himself to be the best, but Naruto's sheer power was something else entirely. Sasuke wasn't just jealous, he was envious. Kakashi, ever the observer, narrowed his eyes at Naruto. The raw force that the boy wielded, along with the deadly efficiency in which he incapacitated the bandits, was unnerving. He had seen strong shinobi before, but this was something beyond strength, it was something unnatural. Naruto, Kakashi called out, his tone stern, this isn't a battlefield. You didn't need to maim him. Naruto glanced at the injured bandit, his cold expression unwavering. Mercy is for those who deserve it, he said flatly. Weaklings like these don't. Kakashi, though reluctant to admit it, knew that Naruto's approach was effective. But it also raised a dangerous question: where did Naruto's limits lie? The boy wasn't just powerful, he was terrifying. Tajuna shifted uncomfortably in his place, a deep unease settling in his gut. This was no ordinary child. And he was starting to realize that the village might not be exaggerating about the demon after all. As they neared the land of waves, the tension in the air grew heavier. Kakashi's instincts were on high alert, and his sense of danger was palpable. Something was wrong. It wasn't just the stormy clouds on the horizon, it was something deeper, something that was watching them. Tajuna, now thoroughly sober, started to feel the weight of the situation. The calmness with which Naruto had dealt with the bandits was still fresh in his mind. He didn't dare question the boy directly, but his unease grew with each passing minute. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, a massive wave of mist rolled over the area, and a dark figure appeared on the horizon, moving with the quiet menace of his shadow. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as he immediately recognized the chakra's signature. Zabuza Mamakai, Kakashi murmured, reaching for his weapon. A rogue shinobi from the hidden mist. And he's not alone. Before Kakashi could react, Zabuza's killing intent filled the air, chilling the very atmosphere. The air itself seemed to warp with the pressure, and the scent of blood seemed to permeate the mist. Zabuza stepped out of the fog, his giant sword, the Kyubikaribisho, gleaming in his hands as his cold, calculating eyes fixed on Team 7. Naruto stood unmoving, feeling the intensity of Zabuza's bloodlust. Mahoraga's will appeared at the back of his mind, spinning slowly as it began to adapt to the rogue shinobi's overwhelming killing intent. Zabuza's swordsmanship and water-style techniques, which could overwhelm the unprepared, were mere obstacles to Mahoraga's ever-adaptive nature. Zabuza grinned cruelly, a malicious glint in his eyes as he drew his sword. You must be the famed team of Konoha. This will be easy. Naruto's eyes glowed faintly. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The wheel was already spinning. Kakashi, sensing that the fight was about to begin, activated his Sharingan, immediately assessing the situation. He could tell Zabuza was testing him, gauging his strength. Without warning, Zabuza launched a wave of water, sending Kakashi crashing into the water and trapping him within the confines of the water prison technique. Naruto's stance shifted as he faced Zabuza. The rogue shinobi was quick, but Naruto's adaptation was quicker. As Zabuza swung his sword with precision and speed, aiming to cleave through Naruto, Mahoraga's power adapted to the flow of chakra running through the blade, rendering it harmless. Zabuza's attacks were effortless to avoid, but the rogue shinobi was far from defeated. Sasuke, seeing an opportunity, lunged forward with the kunai in hand, intending to help Kakashi. But he was forced to fall back as Zabuza's sword, infused with chakra, cleaved through the air like a razor-sharp wind. Sasuke scowled. He's too fast. Naruto, now fully engaged, approached Zabuza with cold, deliberate steps. Every strike, every movement of the sword, was easily countered, as Mahoraga's will absorbed the attacks and adapted. Zabuza's smile faltered. This isn't normal. Before he could react, Naruto's fist shot forward, connecting with Zabuza's arm in a burst of speed, sending a shockwave of force through the air. Zabuza recoiled, gritting his teeth against the sudden pain. The power behind the blow was enough to make even him reconsider his position. Seeing Zabuza retreat momentarily, Naruto stood tall, uncaring, his aura a dark, pulsating reminder of the destructive power he now wielded. Sasuke and Naruto locked eyes for a brief moment. Though Sasuke would never admit it aloud, there was a grudging respect building within him. Naruto's strength, however unnerving, was undeniable. Let's get him, Sasuke muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Naruto nodded, his voice low and impassive. No one gets away. Together, the two worked to free Kakashi from his prison, and though Sasuke resented the boy's superiority, they understood that only by working together would they survive the coming storm. As Zabuza retreated, a glint of something dangerous in his eyes, Kakashi, now freed, coughed up water and steadied himself. That was too close, he muttered. We've only just begun. And as Naruto stood silently, his eyes glowing with the faint light of Mahoraga's power, he knew that no one, not even Zabuza, would be able to stand against him for long. The small house in the land of waves felt like a sanctuary, but the air within was thick with unspoken words and tension. Tajuna's family welcomed Team 7, though Naruto was still a stranger to the warmth others seemed to take for granted. It wasn't just because he was an outsider in their eyes, it was because of what he was. The villagers, including Inari, Tajuna's son, eyed him warily, no different from the way the villagers of Konoha had treated him. Inari, a boy hardened by loss and disillusionment, found it easy to lash out. He mocked Naruto's dream of changing the world, calling him a fool for thinking that anything could be different. You're just like everyone else, Inari spat, his voice dripping with bitterness. You can't change anything. The world doesn't care about fools like you. Naruto, his expression a mask of indifference, met Inari's gaze unflinchingly. His voice, though cold, carried the weight of someone who had long since abandoned the idea of seeking validation from others. I don't care what you think, Naruto responded flatly, his words piercing through the boy's anger like a blade. The world will bend to my will, not the other way around. Inari sneered, clearly unconvinced, but Naruto's words lingered in the air, a promise of something greater than just survival. For all the derision, Naruto knew one truth: power was what changed the world, and he would have it. Despite his harsh exterior, Naruto's actions spoke louder than words. When the village came under threat, when men like Gato tried to destroy the hope the people of the Land of Waves clung to, Naruto was there. He didn't hesitate. He crushed their enemies without mercy, even as the villagers watched in fear. For the first time, some of them began to see Naruto not as a demon, but as something else. Something far more powerful. The days that followed were spent training, and Kakashi had a lesson in mind for Team 7. The task was simple: chakra control through tree climbing. Sasuke and Sakura struggled, finding the technique challenging. Sasuke, in particular, seemed frustrated by his inability to maintain control, while Sakura's movements were shaky at best. But when it was Naruto's turn, there was no hesitation. His chakra flowed through him effortlessly, and in seconds, he was scaling the tree, moving with the ease of someone who had already mastered this technique without breaking a sweat. Kakashi watched, a flicker of concern crossing his features. Naruto's adaptability wasn't just a trait, it was a terrifying skill. He had already surpassed the fundamentals, and it was clear that the boy was on a path no one could predict. Sasuke scowled, his hands trembling as he struggled to stay on the tree. It wasn't just the task that irritated him, it was Naruto's effortless success. "Why is it so easy for you?" Sasuke muttered under his breath, not daring to look Naruto in the eye. Naruto's gaze was distant, his face cold and unbothered. "Because I don't need to struggle," he said quietly. "Some people aren't born to be weak." The second confrontation with Zabuza Momokai and his unexpected companion, Haku, was destined to be a test of strength for Team 7. The mist that surrounded them thickened as they entered the clearing, and the oppressive silence made the air feel charged with anticipation. When Haku unleashed his ice mirrors, the team was momentarily blinded by the icy beauty of the technique. But Naruto wasn't distracted. He stood still, letting Mahoraga's will spin slowly in the back of his mind. The mirrors, reflective and shimmering, would be no challenge. Mahoraga's will adapted instantly to the unique properties of Haku's technique, allowing Naruto to detect the true source of Haku's attacks despite the mirror's deceptive illusions. Sasuke, struggling against the onslaught of ice and Haku's razor-sharp speed, was caught off guard when a blade sliced through his side, leaving him bleeding. The pain sent a surge of adrenaline through Naruto, the rage rising like a tide. The will spun faster, his chakra flaring as the air around him seemed to ripple with power. Naruto's eyes, now glowing with an eerie light, focused on Haku. Every movement, every flicker of his reflection was catalogued, and in an instant, he leaped into the air, shattering the ice mirrors with a single punch. The mirrors exploded into shards, and Haku, who had been hiding among them, was forced to reveal himself. The fight ended with Haku's defeat. But even in victory, Naruto's expression remained impassive. He barely glanced at the young shinobi who had sacrificed everything for the man he called his master. "You chose to die for someone who used you," Naruto muttered as Haku fell, his life slipping away. "Don't expect me to pity you." Zabuza, witnessing the loss of his only companion, was momentarily moved by the boy's sacrifice. Something within the rogue shinobi stirred, and with the final act of defiance, he killed Gato and his men, reclaiming some of the honor he had lost. Naruto watched silently, his eyes never leaving Zabuza. There was no pity, no sympathy in his gaze, only cold, calculated observation. Redemption is a lie, Naruto thought to himself. Everyone has their price, and no one is truly worth saving. When Tajuna's bridge was finally completed, he named it the Bridge of Heroes, dedicating it to the fallen warriors who had fought for its creation. But as the villagers celebrated, Naruto remained indifferent. The bridge meant nothing to him. Heroes and villains were just names, nothing more than pawns in the game of power. He stood at the edge of the completed bridge, watching the waves crash below. The feeling of control, of power, thrummed within him, growing stronger with each passing day. The world wasn't fair. It was broken. And Naruto intended to fix it his way. This world is rotten, Naruto muttered, his voice a low whisper carried by the wind. I'll fix it my way. Sasuke, now more resentful than ever, watched Naruto from a distance, his hatred only growing. Naruto's strength wasn't something to admire, it was something to envy. Sasuke's path to power had always been fueled by revenge, but now there was something more. The rivalry between him and Naruto had only just begun, and Sasuke knew he would stop at nothing to surpass the boy who was already so far ahead. Kakashi, ever the strategist, watched Naruto closely, his thoughts uncertain. The boy's potential was limitless, but so was his danger. Kakashi had trained many, but never one like Naruto. The more he saw, the more he wondered, could Konoha contain him? Or was it only a matter of time before Naruto decided that the village itself was a part of the rot? The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear, Naruto's path would be a path of power and no one would be able to stop him. The Chunin exams were an event that drew attention from all across the ninja world, and Naruto had already become an enigma. His entry into the exams was met with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and disdain from the other participants. They had heard rumors of the demon boy, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that there was something far more terrifying within him than just Kurama's chakra. Naruto's reputation for being untouchable was soon solidified. As he made his way through the various rounds, the whispers of his name spread like wildfire. His raw power was impossible to ignore, and his immunity to even the most advanced techniques left his opponents frustrated and helpless. The first stage, the written exam. The first stage of the exams was the written test, which was known for its difficulty and trickery. Naruto, though no scholar, breezed through the questions with ease, using Mahoraga's adaptation to his advantage. The scroll given to the participants, which could be used for cheating, was merely a distraction to Naruto. His innate ability to adapt allowed him to immediately decipher the answers, bypassing the need for external assistance. Sasuke, on the other hand, noticed how effortlessly Naruto completed the test and couldn't help but feel a twinge of frustration. No matter how hard he trained, no matter how much he struggled, Naruto seemed to excel at everything without even trying. The preliminary fights. The first round of the preliminary matches began with a bang. Naruto stood in the arena, surrounded by some of the best and brightest ninja from across the land. His first opponent, Kiba Inuzuka, was overconfident in his speed and ferocity, but it was clear from the start that Kiba had no chance against Naruto's overwhelming abilities. Kiba launched himself at Naruto with Akamaru by his side, using his enhanced speed and feral instincts to try and overwhelm the boy. However, Mahoraga's adaptation neutralized everything. The moment Kiba's chakra was released to enhance his strikes, Mahoraga's will began spinning, analyzing the technique and making it irrelevant. With a single movement, Naruto sidestepped the attack and grabbed Kiba's arm, twisting it with ruthless precision. The crowd gasped as Kiba cried out in pain, but Naruto didn't flinch. He slammed Kiba into the ground, holding him there with ease. The fight was over before it had even begun. The spectators, including several prominent shinobi, whispered amongst themselves. This was no ordinary child. This was a force of nature, and it was becoming increasingly clear that Naruto's potential was something no one had fully comprehended. Next, Naruto was matched against Neji Hyuga, the prodigy of the Hyuga clan, known for his mastery of the gentle fist style and the Byakugan. Neji's battle strategy focused on targeting his opponent's chakra points with pinpoint precision, a style that had devastated many opponents in the past. As the fight began, Neji immediately activated his Byakugan, aiming to incapacitate Naruto by closing his chakra points. However, Mahoraga's ability to adapt was unparalleled. The moment Neji attempted to strike, Naruto's chakra began to fluctuate, his body responding to the threat before Neji's blows even landed. Is that all you've got? Naruto taunted, his voice cold. You can't stop me. You won't even touch me. Neji gritted his teeth, frustrated by how his attacks were rendered ineffective. Every strike he made was either dodged or absorbed by Mahoraga's adaptive nature. Neji's attacks, once considered nearly unstoppable, were now meaningless. Finally, Naruto's strength overwhelmed Neji. With a single punch, he shattered Neji's defensive posture, knocking him to the ground. Neji's arrogance crumbled as he stared up at Naruto, who stood over him, unbothered. "You think you can judge the fates of others?" Naruto said, his voice cold. "You're just like everyone else, weak and foolish." The crowd was silent. The battle, once thought to be a challenge, had turned into a one-sided display of power. Neji, the proud and talented Hyuga, was left on the ground, his confidence shattered. But it was Naruto's battle with Gaara of the desert that truly solidified his reputation as an unstoppable force. Gaara, the Jinchuriki of Shikaku, was a violent, unpredictable force who viewed anyone who challenged him as little more than an inconvenience. His sand-based techniques were a terrifying spectacle, capable of obliterating anything in their path. When Gaara faced off against Naruto, it was expected to be a battle between two destructive forces, two Jinchuriki fighting for dominance. From the start, Gaara's sand swarmed the arena, aiming to suffocate and crush Naruto with its unrelenting weight. But as soon as the sand touched Naruto, Mahoraga's will began to spin. The sand, which had crushed and pulverized countless enemies before, was now brittle and ineffective. Naruto's body moved effortlessly through the field, his steps unimpeded by the sand that had once been a weapon of terror. He raised his hand, and in a single, effortless motion, shattered the sand encasing him. Gaara's eyes widened in disbelief, his control over Shikaku's chakra failing to assert itself against Naruto's unyielding power. "Is this the best you can do?" Naruto sneered, a mocking tone in his voice. "I've seen more effective attacks from weaklings." Gaara roared in frustration, unleashing a torrent of sand in every direction, but Mahoraga's adaptation rendered the onslaught useless. The sand shattered on impact with Naruto's form, and Naruto's next strike sent Gaara crashing into the ground. As Gaara struggled to stand, Naruto walked forward slowly, his presence suffocating the air around him. The crowd was in stunned silence as Naruto loomed over Gaara, his dominance absolute. "You're nothing but a puppet," Naruto said, his voice filled with disdain. "Controlled by fear and power that you can't even understand." With one final blow, Naruto crushed the sand protecting Gaara, leaving the Jinchuriki lying defeated. As Naruto stood victorious, his chest rising and falling with calm breaths, the arena was filled with stunned silence. Gaara had been a force of nature in his own right, a Jinchuriki who could flatten entire villages. But to Naruto, he was just another opponent to be crushed beneath his feet. The other competitors, including Sasuke, were shaken. What did it mean for them when someone like Naruto existed? How could they ever compete with a power like his? But the truth was undeniable: Naruto was not just another shinobi. He was a force of nature, one whose power seemed limitless. And as he walked off the arena, leaving a trail of awe and fear in his wake, he understood one thing: this was only the beginning. The Chunin exams had only just begun, but Naruto had already made it clear to everyone that there was no challenge he couldn't face and no opponent he couldn't defeat. His path to dominance had only just started, and the world would soon learn that it could not stand against him. The Chunin exams had barely ended, and the tension in Konoha was palpable. The village, still reeling from Naruto's display of power during the exams, now found itself thrust into an even darker ordeal. The invasion by Orochimaru, a rogue ninja of the highest caliber, would push the village's defenses to the limit and test Naruto's resolve in a way no one could have predicted. Orochimaru's infiltration. The invasion began with a calculated strike. Orochimaru, under the guise of a participant in the Chunin exams, revealed his true intentions during the finals. The Konoha Crush was set in motion, a scheme to tear down the village's most vital institution and its revered Hokage. Orochimaru's snake slithered through the streets, spreading chaos as he set his sights on the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the man who had led Konoha with wisdom and strength for decades. With the help of his allies, including the traitorous Sound Ninja and the revived members of the Konoha 12, Orochimaru's invasion was swift and violent. The village was thrown into turmoil as buildings crumbled and the streets ran red with blood. But what Orochimaru had not anticipated was the presence of Naruto Uzumaki, now fully aware of the extent of his power and his role in shaping the world around him. Naruto's intervention. As the invasion raged, Naruto's instincts flared. His body, enhanced by Mahoraga's adaptive powers, felt the heat of battle more keenly than ever. The feeling of invincibility was becoming more concrete, and Naruto's desire to protect Konoha, though it was underlined with his own twisted sense of justice, was undeniable. When Orochimaru and his snakes made their move to breach the Hokage's office, Naruto didn't hesitate. He arrived just in time to see the third Hokage locked in combat with Orochimaru, the cursed man snakes coiling around the old Hokage's form, their venomous fangs ready to strike. Without warning, Naruto's form burst through the smoke-filled battlefield, his chakra flaring with such intensity that the ground trembled beneath him. The will of Mahoraga spun into motion. As Orochimaru launched a barrage of serpentine projectiles, Naruto's adaptation kicked in instantly. His chakra flared, shifting, and morphing to neutralize every threat as if they were nothing more than fleeting disturbances. The first few snakes were torn apart by Naruto's sheer force, their venomous strikes turned harmless as Mahoraga twisted their energy, rendering them ineffective. Orochimaru, initially caught off guard, hissed with frustration, summoning more snakes to overwhelm Naruto. But Naruto's body adapted faster than the serpents could strike. The will spun faster, and every snake that came into contact with Naruto's chakra was either deflected or obliterated. Orochimaru growled, his hands weaving through seals as he prepared to unleash a forbidden jutsu. His cursed techniques and summoned snakes meant to overpower Konoha's defenses were effortlessly nullified as Naruto's body reconfigured to absorb and counteract the attacks. Orochimaru's jutsu was met with a force of nature that not even he could control. Orochimaru's retreat. Realizing that Naruto had grown too powerful to be ignored, Orochimaru summoned his final, desperate measure, the summoning of the Kukiyo's no Jutsu, to call forth his son and serpentine beast, Manda. The massive snake reared up from the earth, its monstrous form dwarfing the battlefield. However, Naruto wasn't fazed. As Manda coiled through the air, his body reacted instinctively, and the will of Mahoraga spun again. In mere moments, Naruto's chakra adapted to Manda's immense size, its poisonous fangs, and its overwhelming strength. With a simple movement of his hand, he redirected Manda's strike, sending the massive beast crashing into the ground, its fangs snapping harmlessly against Naruto's barrier-like aura. Orochimaru, seeing his plans unravel before his very eyes, hissed with rage. He attempted to flee, retreating into the shadows, but not before casting one last spell at the Hokage. The third Hokage, weakened by the battle, could not keep up with Orochimaru's cunning retreat. It was then that Naruto made his final move. His chakra surged, a tide of energy that adapted to the cursed seals, rendering Orochimaru's escape futile. Naruto extended his hand, and in a moment of sheer power, he crushed the cursed seals Orochimaru had placed on the Hokage, neutralizing the danger completely. The invader was forced to flee, the destruction of his plans leaving him with no choice but to retreat from Konoha, abandoning his mission of destruction. Aftermath of the battle. The dust settled, and Naruto stood victorious in the aftermath of the battle. The third Hokage, though gravely wounded, had been saved by Naruto's timely intervention. But while the village had been protected from certain annihilation, the villagers' perceptions of Naruto remained unchanged or, perhaps, grew worse. Though he had fought to save Konoha, Naruto's actions had only deepened the fear that surrounded him. Many saw him as a dangerous weapon, a living time bomb with the potential to destroy the village at any moment. His strength, forged from the curse of the Nine Tails and the power of Mahoraga, was something the villagers could neither control nor fully understand. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, had long known of Naruto's power, but he now feared the consequences of such raw strength. He had seen firsthand the lengths to which Naruto could go to protect Konoha, but he also understood that Naruto's strength was something that could easily turn into a threat if left unchecked. Naruto, however, wasn't concerned with the villagers' opinions. His mind was on something much grander, the realization that he was the only one capable of truly protecting the world. "I don't need their gratitude," Naruto muttered to himself as he walked away from the wreckage. "They're all just scared of me. They'll never understand." The villagers, once again saved by the very thing they feared, looked on in silence as Naruto disappeared into the shadows. There were no cheers, no celebrations. Only cold, apprehensive stares. The council's decision. In the aftermath of the invasion, the village elders and the council of Konoha debated fiercely about Naruto's future. Some saw him as a savior, while others viewed him as an uncontrollable force, one that could potentially bring the village to ruin if left unchecked. The third Hokage, though weakened, voiced his concerns. "Naruto's power is undeniable, but we must be cautious. The more he grows, the less we can control him. The balance of power in Konoha is fragile." And yet, despite the council's fears, there was no denying one simple truth: Naruto had saved them all. Naruto's realization. As Naruto stood on the outskirts of Konoha, overlooking the village, he felt something stirring within him. There was no gratitude, no recognition, only fear. But that was fine. If the villagers wanted to fear him, so be it. They would learn to understand one day, and when that day came, they would bow to him, not out of fear, but out of respect. "I'll make them all bow," Naruto whispered under his breath. "Konoha will be mine. This world will be mine." The Konoha crush had failed, but for Naruto, it was merely the beginning. The aftermath of the Konoha crush left the village in a state of fragile recovery. Although Naruto had saved the village from Orochimaru's destruction, the seeds of fear and suspicion had been deeply sown. Some in Konoha saw Naruto as an uncontrollable weapon, a ticking time bomb that could obliterate everything at a moment's notice. But there was one man who saw in Naruto something far more valuable. Danzo Shimura, the leader of Root, the secretive and rogue faction of Konoha's military, had always been a man of cold calculation. Known for his ruthless and underhanded methods, Danzo's interest in Naruto wasn't driven by fear or admiration, but by his belief that Naruto's immense power could be manipulated for his own purposes. In the shadows of the village, Danzo began plotting. Danzo's offer. One night, under the cover of darkness, Danzo approached Naruto in an attempt to sway him into joining Root. As a man who had been deeply involved in Konoha's darkest secrets, Danzo knew how to play his cards. He needed Naruto, someone with unparalleled power, under his control. The offer was simple: join Root. Serve the village, serve Konoha, and together, we will reshape the future. With your strength, we can rid the world of its weaknesses. Danzo spoke with calm authority, attempting to appeal to Naruto's growing sense of power. But the truth was, Danzo didn't care about Naruto's ideals. He cared only about bending the boy to his will, using him as a tool to further his vision of Konoha's dominance over the world. Naruto, however, wasn't like the others who had bowed to power for the sake of peace or hierarchy. The idea of submitting to anyone was utterly repugnant to him. From the moment he had realized the full extent of Mahoraga's power, he had sworn never to kneel to another. "Serve you." Naruto's voice was cold, unwavering. "I'll never serve anyone again." Danzo's eyes narrowed as Naruto's words echoed in his mind. His plans had just been rejected, an unexpected outcome that only fueled his growing desire to control the boy. With a twisted smile, Danzo made his decision. "Very well, Naruto Uzumaki. If you will not serve me, then you must be eliminated." The ambush. Unknown to Naruto, Danzo had already sent Root agents to execute the order. They were highly trained, loyal, and completely ruthless. They were told to subdue or, if necessary, kill Naruto without hesitation. Their mission was simple: the boy was a threat, and threats had to be removed. The agents infiltrated Konoha streets in the dead of night, moving like shadows through the alleys and rooftops. They surrounded Naruto, setting up the perfect ambush. Naruto, who had been walking alone, soon sensed something was off. His instincts, sharpened by years of survival and his increasingly heightened awareness due to Mahoraga's adaptation, told him he was being watched. The air was thick with malice. He didn't need to turn around to know they were there. In a swift, fluid motion, Naruto whirled around, his eyes glowing with an eerie calm. "Come out, Danzo's dogs. I know you're there." The root agents, confident in their superior numbers and training, emerged from the shadows, surrounding him in a perfect ring. Each agent carried a kunai, and their eyes were filled with cold determination. They had been trained to eliminate threats, and Naruto had just made himself one. The battle, ruthless efficiency. Without hesitation, the root agents charged. They launched a flurry of kunai and shuriken toward Naruto, each one aimed with deadly precision. But Naruto didn't flinch. In an instant, the will of Mahoraga spun into motion, its presence more commanding than ever before. The weapons, aimed at Naruto's vitals, were easily deflected. His body adapted to each strike, neutralizing the lethality of the weapons in a split second. The chakra-laden kunai were reduced to harmless fragments before they could even come close to touching him. The agents, realizing their weapons were ineffective, resorted to more advanced tactics. They spread out, using ninjutsu to disorient Naruto and surround him. Shadow clones and earth-based jutsus erupted from the ground, designed to trap and restrain him. But as they attacked, Naruto's body adapted faster than they could follow. His senses heightened, Mahoraga's will turning to counter every attempt. As one root agent tried to trap him in a cage of earth style, Naruto's body shifted, slipping effortlessly through the hardened earth as if it were water. His speed was incomprehensible, his strikes devastating and immediate. One by one, the agents fell. Each of their attacks was nothing more than a brief flicker of intent before being absorbed and negated by Naruto's unmatched adaptability. He tore through them with ruthless precision, each movement calculated to break their defenses with terrifying speed. When the final agent attempted to flee, Naruto's eyes flared with malice. The will of Mahoraga spun once more, and the agent's chakra was immediately analyzed and rendered ineffective. Naruto caught the man in mid-flight, his hand gripping the agent's throat with unyielding force. "Running won't save you," Naruto whispered as the man gasped for air, his body slowly giving in to the overwhelming force that Naruto had become. With a quick snap, Naruto ended the battle. The aftermath. When the dust settled, Naruto stood amidst the fallen agents of Root, his eyes cold and unwavering. His body was untouched, not a scratch on him. The power of Mahoraga had rendered the entire ambush pointless. The scene was grisly. Dozens of Root agents lay scattered across the battlefield, defeated without mercy. Naruto had become a force to be reckoned with, and he had proven to Danzo's forces that no amount of planning could ever overpower him. "You thought you could control me?" Naruto muttered, his voice tinged with contempt. "No one controls me. Not even you, Danzo." Naruto didn't care about the men who had just fallen. To him, they were nothing more than pawns in a game he refused to play. As for Danzo, he had made a grave mistake underestimating Naruto's will. Danzo's reaction. Back in the shadows of Konoha, Danzo seethed with fury. His agents, the best of Root, had been crushed in an instant. He had underestimated Naruto's power and determination. Danzo's anger was palpable as he seated in his private chambers. "So, the boy refuses to submit," Danzo growled. But this is far from over. His plans to recruit Naruto had failed, but in failure, Danzo found resolve. He knew now that Naruto was not a tool to be used but a force to be destroyed. He would begin anew, this time with more subtlety, more patience. For Naruto, the battle with Rude was just another step on his path to dominance. The more powerful enemies that came for him, the more his power would grow. And soon, the entire world would bow to him whether they wanted to or not. As he stood over the bodies of the fallen agents, Naruto's lips curled into a cold smile. "Let them come," he whispered. "The world will fall to my will." Konoha, the village that had once been his home, now felt like a gilded cage. The same walls that once promised protection now confined him, stifling his every move. Naruto had grown up under the weight of isolation, scorned by the villagers, and manipulated by the very system that he was supposed to serve. For years, he fought for their recognition, their respect, but with every effort, the village only cast him aside, seeing him not as the son of a hero, but as a weapon, a tool. The betrayal was no longer just an occasional insult or a harsh glance, it was systemic, built into the very fabric of Konoha. Each day, it became clearer that the village had only ever feared him, never seen him as a person but as a walking disaster waiting to happen. The fear that his power invoked kept them at arm's length, and the more they feared, the harder they tried to control him. But Naruto had learned to control his own power. He no longer feared the beast within him, nor did he need Konoha to define his worth. The confrontation. It was a cold, silent evening when Naruto made his way to the Hokage's office. His usual vibrant orange jumpsuit was replaced by black, the color fitting his mood dark, decisive, and unyielding. The air seemed to hum with the tension of his determination. He had come to confront the very people who had been both his jailers and his would-be masters. Inside, the Hokage's office was lit by dim lanterns. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat at his desk, his aged hands gripping a letter, his face lined with concern as he glanced over it. The council, a group of elders and clan leaders, were present, their expressions serious. They were used to the grand spectacle of ninja missions and battles, but this was something different. They could feel the weight of what was coming. Naruto stood in the doorway, his presence commanding attention. His eyes were cold, his face unreadable, yet a storm raged behind him. He had been summoned to the Hokage's office countless times in the past, always for matters that concerned his status as the Nine-Tails host or to remind him of his duties as a protector of Konoha. But today, it was he who called the shots. Hiruzen, seeing the uncharacteristic coldness in Naruto's gaze, sighed. "Naruto, what brings you here tonight?" Naruto stepped forward, his footsteps heavy with intent. "I'm here to end the charade." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew this moment was coming, the inevitable confrontation with the boy who had grown too powerful to control. Naruto's voice was ice cold, carrying the weight of years of frustration. "You all claim to care about the village, but look at what you've built. You've used me, manipulated me, and kept me in the shadows for your own convenience. The Hokage, the council, everyone, each of you played your part in ensuring that I would never be anything more than a tool." Hiruzen's tired eyes met Naruto's with a deep, regretful understanding. "Naruto, I have always tried to protect you, to protect the village and you." Naruto scoffed. "Protection? You protected your precious village while letting me rot. You let the villagers treat me like trash. You let me be the scapegoat for everything that went wrong in Konoha." He paused, his tone turning darker. "The only reason I'm still here, standing before you, is because I'm too powerful to break. You fear me, Hokage, and you always have. Fear isn't protection. It's control." The council members began to murmur, uneasy. They had underestimated how far Naruto's hatred had run. They had expected him to stay in line, to follow their orders, to be the hero of the story they wanted him to be. But he had become something else, something beyond their reach. Naruto's eyes locked on them, his voice growing more defiant. "You're all cowards, hiding behind titles and bureaucracy, unable to see the truth. This village is a cage, and you are the wardens. You never wanted me to be free. You wanted me to be a weapon. Well, I'm done being your weapon. Jireya's intervention. Before the situation could escalate further, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway, Jireya. The Chunin, Naruto's former mentor and one of the few who had always shown some semblance of kindness, stood there, his face a mixture of concern and resolve. Jireya's voice was calm, but the weight of it carried the experience of a lifetime of hardship. Naruto, don't be rash. You've always had a choice, but now is not the time to sever your ties with the village. Naruto turned his gaze toward him, his anger barely contained. You've always talked about destiny, about balance, about the future. Well, Jireya, I've heard enough. His eyes hardened. Destiny is nothing but a chain. A chain you tried to wrap around me, like the rest of them. But I won't be anyone's puppet anymore. Jireya's brow furrowed. He had always believed in Naruto's potential to change the world, but he had never anticipated this level of defiance. Naruto, listen. The path you're walking leads to destruction. You're stronger than anyone in this village, but strength alone won't make you happy. You need to find balance. You need to understand that your power has a place. Naruto sneered. Balance? Prophecy. I don't need anyone to tell me my place anymore. I've been alone for too long to believe in some grand fate. I'll carve my own path, one where I'm not a tool for anyone's agenda. Jireya's eyes softened, but the disappointment was evident. So, you're rejecting everything I've taught you? Everything you could be. Naruto's gaze flickered briefly, but his resolve didn't falter. I'm rejecting you, too, Jireya. I'm rejecting all of you. I don't need anyone to tell me who I'm supposed to be. The breaking point. With the final glance at the Hokage and the council, Naruto turned away. His presence was overwhelming, and the room seemed to tremble under the weight of his power. I'll leave Konoha, and I'll take what's mine. You can't control me anymore. Before anyone could stop him, Naruto disappeared in a blur of speed, leaving the Hokage's office in stunned silence. Jireya stood motionless for a moment before letting out a deep sigh, the gravity of Naruto's decision settling in. It's too late now. I hope he knows what he's walking into. But Naruto had already made up his mind. Konoha was a place that had never embraced him. It had only ever feared what he could become. And now, he would show them just how far he was willing to go to break free from their chains. The world awaited him, and with Mahoraga's power at his side, Naruto would carve a new future, one that would reshape the very foundation of the shinobi world. The moon hung low over Konoha, casting long shadows across the streets. It was a quiet night, one that carried a heavy, unspoken weight, a night that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Naruto's life. But for the villagers, it would be the start of something far darker, a future that no one in the village could have predicted. Naruto stood at the edge of the village, his eyes focused on the horizon. Behind him, the walls of Konoha loomed like a prison, a cage that had held him for far too long. He had endured years of mistreatment, years of rejection, and now, standing on the precipice of his freedom, he could feel the weight of it all lifting from his shoulders. He had once sought acceptance, recognition from the village that had only ever seen him as a tool. But that was over. Now, the world would bend to his will. He turned his gaze one last time toward Konoha, his lips curling into a cold, humorless smile. You never wanted me here anyway. So why should I stay? Without another word, he disappeared into the night, leaving the village behind, and his future wide open before him. The morning light broke over the village, its golden rays casting warmth over the streets. But as the sun rose, an unsettling sense of dread began to spread. Word quickly spread through the village that Naruto had vanished. At first, people thought it was just another one of his pranks or a temporary disappearance. But as the hours passed, it became clear Naruto was gone for good. The Hokage's office was in turmoil. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out over the village. His heart sank as he realized what had happened. Despite all his efforts to guide Naruto, despite the hopes he had for the boy, it was all in vain. Naruto had made his decision, and there was no turning back now. The council convened in haste, their voices raised in panic as they debated the consequences. Naruto was powerful, far too powerful to simply let go without repercussions. What would the other villages think? What would they do if they learned that Konoha's greatest weapon had just walked away? But there was one person who knew exactly what would happen next: Sasuke Uchiha. In the Uchiha clan compound, Sasuke stood alone in the training grounds. The sound of his sword slicing through the air was the only sound that filled the space. His mind was a whirlwind, torn between the desire to become stronger and the bitterness that had settled in his chest. Sasuke had always viewed Naruto as a rival, someone he could never fully respect, but someone he had to surpass. In his eyes, Naruto's strength had always been a challenge, something to be beaten. Yet, over time, Sasuke had come to realize that Naruto was different. His power wasn't just something to be rivaled, it was something to be feared. When Sasuke first heard the news that Naruto had left the village, a fire ignited within him. It wasn't just that Naruto had left, it was the way he had done it. Naruto had walked away on his own terms, with power far beyond anything Sasuke had ever imagined. It angered Sasuke, but more than that, it frustrated him. How could Naruto have become so strong? How could he have surpassed him so easily? Sasuke's eyes narrowed as he gripped his katana tightly. He thinks he's untouchable, that he can leave and do whatever he wants. But I'll show him. I'll make him realize that no one leaves Konoha. Sasuke's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword as he made his decision. He would surpass Naruto. He would hunt him down, force him to return, and prove once and for all that he was the stronger of the two. But there was something else. Sasuke didn't just want to surpass Naruto, he wanted to break him. If Naruto thought he could leave the village and become a god, then Sasuke would be the one to bring him back to reality. No one leaves Konoha. No one becomes a king without paying the price. Naruto's departure had not been quiet. He hadn't simply vanished into the night, he had set a course for his future, one that would see him break the chains of the shinobi world and reshape it in his own image. As he traveled away from Konoha, the world outside the village unfolded before him. He had no clear destination in mind, only a single goal: to bring down the corrupt system that had held him captive for so long. The more he walked, the more his mind focused on the path ahead. The power of Mahoraga thrummed within him, constantly adapting, constantly growing. Every moment he spent in the outside world was an opportunity for him to sharpen his abilities, to become more than just a weapon of destruction. He wasn't just going to overthrow the system, he was going to reshape it, to make it a world where power was the only thing that mattered. Naruto smiled to himself, a twisted, almost savage grin. This world is a battlefield. And I'm going to be the one who stands at the top. But as he moved forward, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was following him. Sasuke's rivalry had always been a constant force in his life. And now, that force was about to follow him into the outside world. Sasuke wouldn't let him go so easily. But Naruto didn't care. Let him come. For Naruto, there was only one goal: to become the master of his own fate, to crush anyone who stood in his way, and to destroy the very system that had tried to break him. The world would bend to his will, and Konoha would burn. The desert wind howled through the abandoned village at the edge of the land of wind. Dust swirled around broken buildings, remnants of a once thriving settlement that had been abandoned after the Great War. It was here that Naruto made his first move, a calculated meeting with a group of rogue shinobi, former ninja who had lost everything in the wars, cast aside by their villages, and now had nowhere to turn. They were the outcasts, the forgotten ones who, like Naruto, had seen the corruption of the shinobi system firsthand. The sun set, casting an orange glow across the cracked earth as Naruto stood at the center of a gathering, a group of former assassins, missing nin, and mercenaries who now saw him as their leader. His presence alone was enough to draw their attention, his power radiating from every pore of his body. The will of change had begun. Naruto's voice cut through the silence like a blade. This world was built on lies and bloodshed. The 5 great nations and their pathetic leaders are the true demons, not us. They use us as pawns in their wars, toss us aside when we're no longer useful. But I will change all of that. I will break the chains, and when I'm done, this world will be a place where power is the only thing that matters. The weak will be crushed. The strong will reign. The rogue shinobi listened intently, captivated by Naruto's conviction. His words were harsh, but they resonated with their pain, their anger at being abandoned by the very system they had sworn to protect. One by one, they pledged their allegiance to him, seeing in Naruto not just a leader, but a godlike figure, someone who could reshape the world into something they could control. Naruto's eyes gleamed with cold, calculating ambition. We'll start with the leaders. Each of the 5 great nations has a figurehead, someone at the top of their pyramid of power. But no matter how high they sit, they're all weak. I'll tear them down one by one, and with each fall, the system will crumble. The world will be remade in my image. The birth of the will of change. Naruto's faction, the will of change, was born from desperation, but it quickly became a powerful force in the shadows of the shinobi world. The members of the faction were a varied group. Some had been soldiers in the hidden villages, others were exiled clans or rogue ninjas, and some were simply wanderers seeking power in a world that had no place for them. But they all had one thing in common, a desire to break free from the chains that had bound them to the old ways. Under Naruto's guidance, the will of change quickly began to gather strength. Naruto's power alone was enough to intimidate entire villages, and Mahoraga's adaptability rendered every ambush or attack against them useless. His followers became fanatical, seeing him not only as a leader but as the force that would destroy the old order. In their eyes, Naruto was a god, a being who could destroy everything and rebuild it in his image. Naruto's charisma and brutal efficiency in battle drew more and more to his cause. But what truly cemented his growing empire was his vision, a vision of a world without weakness, a world where the strong reigned supreme, and the old system of the shinobi villages was reduced to ashes. He began to handpick his lieutenants, rogue shinobi who had proven themselves in battle, men and women who understood the value of power. These were not just subordinates, they were his generals, each one given a specific mission to weaken the 5 great nations and their respective villages. The power Naruto wielded through Mahoraga only amplified his reach, and soon, the tremors of his actions were felt across the land. The first target, the hidden leaf. Naruto's first true target was Konoha itself, the very village that had cast him aside. It was the symbol of everything wrong with the shinobi system, a village of hypocrisy, corruption, and false pretenses. His first move was surgical. He had spies within the village, people who were loyal to his cause. He sent a message to Konoha's leadership, a warning. The time of your rule is over. You will submit, or you will be destroyed. The council and the Hokage immediately went into high alert, aware of the growing threat outside their walls. However, Naruto's faction was not some simple band of rogue ninjas. They were well organized and powerful, and each attack they launched against Konoha's defenses was a calculated strike aimed at destabilizing the village from within. Naruto wasn't looking for a direct confrontation, at least not yet. He wanted to dismantle Konoha's power structure, to create cracks in the foundation before the final blow. Sasuke, still pursuing Naruto, was caught in the crossfire. But Naruto, now fully aware of Sasuke's obsession with surpassing him, saw his former rival as both a potential ally and an obstacle. Sasuke, if you want to stop me, you'll have to do more than chase me. You'll have to change the world, just like I am. Targeting the other villages. While Konoha remained a focus, Naruto knew that his ultimate goal required him to dismantle the entire shinobi world. His next target was the Hidden Mist. The village was known for its brutal tactics and mistreatment of its people. But it also had valuable resources and connections with the other villages, making it a key target in his campaign of destruction. Naruto sent his most trusted generals to handle the operation, each given orders to destroy critical infrastructure and assassinate key leaders. His faction attacked with precision, wiping out the village's higher UPS and forcing the remaining forces to fall in line. It wasn't just a physical takeover, it was a psychological one. Naruto was showing the world that he was a force to be reckoned with. As each of the 5 great nations began to feel the pressure, whispers of Naruto's rise spread like wildfire. The leaders of the remaining villages began to realize they were facing something unlike anything the shinobi world had seen before. Naruto wasn't just an outlaw or a rogue ninja, he was the herald of change, and that change would sweep across the nations with unrelenting force. The growing power of the will. Naruto stood on a cliff, overlooking the ruins of a village he had just conquered. His followers gathered below, chanting his name. The will of change was no longer just a group of disgruntled shinobi, it had become a movement, an ideology that called for the destruction of the old world and the rise of a new order. This world is broken, Naruto murmured to himself, watching the sunset. But it won't be for much longer. We'll break their systems. We'll remake it all. And when it's done, no one will ever be able to stop us. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the faint sound of his followers' chants echoed in the distance, a reminder that the world was changing, one village at a time. The world had shifted under Naruto's rule. Nations trembled at his rise, and the once proud shinobi system began to crumble under the relentless assault of his faction, the will of change. Yet, the villages would not go down without a fight. The remnants of the shinobi world's old guard, those who had once been Naruto's comrades, mentors, and friends, were called upon to stop him. The first of these clashes came when Kakashi, Sakura, and several other former Konoha shinobi were dispatched to stop the rogue force. Kakashi, now with a deeper understanding of the danger Naruto posed, was more determined than ever to bring his former student back or eliminate him if necessary. He led his team into enemy territory, knowing full well the cost of failure would be devastating. Naruto, standing at the head of his growing faction, awaited them calmly. His body was a presence that exuded power, and his eyes gleamed with cold determination. Mahoraga's will spun silently within him, ready to neutralize any threat. Kakashi, Naruto called out, his voice steady and unwavering, "You always thought I was just a kid, didn't you? A joke? Well, now you know. This is the world I will reshape. And you're too weak to stop me." Kakashi's Sharingan flared to life, but Naruto's power was beyond what he had prepared for. Mahoraga's adaptation was like an unseen force, countering everything Kakashi threw at him. Every Konoha, every jutsu was rendered useless, disintegrated or absorbed into the power of Mahoraga. It was clear that the battle would be a one-sided affair. Kakashi's squad made one final, desperate attempt to overpower Naruto, but their efforts were futile. Sakura's enhanced strength, the culmination of her training, was useless against the might of Mahoraga. Naruto effortlessly evaded or nullified every attack. One by one, the members of the squad were left exhausted, bloodied, and broken, but none were fatally wounded. Kakashi, realizing they stood no chance, gave the order to retreat. "We can't stop him, Sakura," Kakashi muttered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Not like this. We need a better plan." Naruto watched them retreat without a word, his expression hardening with every step they took. They were his family, his friends, but now they were enemies, weaklings who couldn't see the truth. Sasuke's challenge. The real confrontation came soon after. Sasuke, still burning with the need to surpass Naruto, arrived at the front lines alone, his Sharingan blazing. There was no hesitation in his eyes, only a cold, burning rage. His heart, already torn by betrayal and the fall of his clan, could no longer afford to sit idly by while Naruto destroyed the world he had once sought to protect. "Naruto," Sasuke called out, his voice filled with venom. "I won't let you destroy everything. You think you're some god, but I'll stop you. I'll be the one to end this." Naruto turned slowly, his cold eyes locking onto Sasuke. "You really think you can stop me, Sasuke?" Naruto asked, his voice dark and unfeeling. "You've been chasing me your entire life, but you're still nothing more than a shadow. Weak. Pathetic." The words stung, but Sasuke's pride would not allow him to back down. "I don't need your pity. I'll kill you myself if that's what it takes." The battle that ensued was nothing short of cataclysmic. Sasuke unleashed the full might of his abilities, using his Sharingan and Rinnegan to cast illusions, control the flow of time, and manipulate space. His techniques were powerful, his strategies ruthless. But every strike he made, every jutsu he cast, was met with Naruto's uncanny ability to adapt. Mahoraga's will turned faster, compensating for Sasuke's speed, neutralizing the Rinnegan's gravity-altering effects, and rendering the Sharingan's genjutsu ineffective. Sasuke unleashed his full arsenal: the Chidori, the Amaterasu flames, and the power of the Rinnegan, each attack more devastating than the last. But Naruto was already several steps ahead. He adapted with cold precision, avoiding each blow and countering with his own brutal force. Sasuke's hatred, his desperate need to prove himself, drove him forward. He summoned the last remnants of his strength, transforming his body with the cursed energy he had obtained through Orochimaru's influence. Sasuke and Naruto collided with the force of a hurricane, their blows creating shockwaves that shattered the ground beneath them. Naruto's face remained impassive as Sasuke landed a brutal punch to his stomach, but it was quickly absorbed by Mahoraga's adaptation. Sasuke's final, fateful attempt to end the battle came when he activated his ultimate technique, a combination of Amaterasu and Chidori, aiming directly for Naruto's heart. But even this failed. Mahoraga's adaptation absorbed the energy, rendering the strike useless, and before Sasuke could react, Naruto struck back. With a single, devastating blow, Naruto shattered Sasuke's rib cage, leaving him bloodied and on the verge of death. Sasuke collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Naruto stood over him, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "I told you, Sasuke," Naruto said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "You'll never surpass me. You're too weak. I'm the one who will change this world." The aftermath of Sasuke's defeat. Sasuke lay broken on the ground, his body battered and his spirit shattered. He had always viewed Naruto as a rival, as a necessary obstacle to his own power. But now, he saw the truth. Naruto was no longer the foolish, naive boy he had once known. He was something else entirely, something far beyond Sasuke's comprehension. Naruto turned his back on Sasuke, leaving him there, defeated and broken. He had no time for weakness. The world had to be remade, and he would be the one to shape it. As Sasuke's breathing slowed, his mind raced with thoughts of revenge. But deep down, he knew it wasn't over yet. Naruto's rise might be unstoppable for now, but Sasuke wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. But for now, Naruto had won. The shinobi world, broken and desperate, would soon be his to control. The Akatsuki, a shadowy organization of rogue ninja with their own plans for the world, had long observed Naruto's rise with a mixture of awe and fear. Initially, they viewed him as a potential asset, someone whose power could be harnessed for their own ambitions. However, as Naruto's might grew, it became clear that he posed a threat to the very ideals the Akatsuki sought to manipulate. Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki, took it upon himself to challenge Naruto. He saw Naruto's power as an obstacle to his vision of world peace through force, and believed that only by defeating Naruto could he demonstrate his own supremacy and reshape the world in his image. Nagato, having inherited the power of the Rinnegan, believed himself to be the true god of the shinobi world. But against Mahoraga's adaptation, even the powers of the Rinnegan would fall short. Itachi's arrival. Itachi Uchiha, a man marked by tragedy, was sent to test Naruto first. He had always been a figure of mystery and intrigue to Naruto, his past and motivations clouded in secrecy. But Naruto had no illusions about Itachi. He could see the desperation in his eyes, the man driven by guilt and unresolved pain. But Naruto wasn't interested in saving anyone. He was focused on his own vision, one where no god, not even the former Uchiha prodigy, could stand in his way. Itachi attacked with a deadly combination of genjutsu, fire-style techniques, and the feared Amaterasu flames. The flames burned with a heat that could reduce even the toughest shinobi to ash. But Naruto, now fully attuned to Mahoraga's power, felt no fear. The will of adaptation turned. The Amaterasu flames, so intense and dangerous to most, were absorbed by Mahoraga's innate resistance, burning away harmlessly before they even touched Naruto. Is this all? Naruto mocked, as he moved effortlessly through the battle. His body was unscathed as he dodged and countered, overwhelming Itachi with raw power. You think you can defeat me with illusions and fire? I am beyond your reach. Itachi's eyes widened as Naruto's fists shattered his illusions, breaking the Tsukuyomi without so much as a flinch. The genjutsu couldn't trap him, and the flames couldn't burn him. With a devastating punch, Naruto sent Itachi crashing into the ground, breaking his will and his body. This is your fate, Itachi, Naruto said coldly. You can't save anyone. You can't even save yourself. Pain's challenge. After Itachi's defeat, Pain, the self-proclaimed god of the shinobi world, arrived to deal with Naruto. He had heard the rumors, the stories of a boy who could adapt to anything, who was untouchable by conventional means. Pain didn't believe it. He believed in his own power and the power of his 6 bodies, which could use the Rinnegan's vast array of techniques to bend the world to his will. Pain attacked Naruto with everything he had, unleashing his full arsenal of powerful jutsu. The skies darkened as Pain summoned the power of Shinra Tensei to crush everything in its path. The force of the blast was enough to devastate an entire village. But Naruto stood tall, unfazed. Is this your idea of a god? Naruto sneered, his voice rising above the chaos. Mahoraga's will spun faster, adapting to the gravitational forces and neutralizing the pull of Shinra Tensei before it even touched him. Naruto's feet remained firmly planted on the ground, untouched by Pain's technique. Pain, stunned by the lack of effect, attempted to control the battlefield using Chibaku Tensei, gathering gravitational forces to trap Naruto in a massive sphere of rock and debris. The sky itself seemed to cave in around him. But once again, Mahoraga's adaptation rendered the technique useless. The sphere of rock shattered, unable to contain Naruto's will. Naruto leaped into the air, his voice now a booming declaration. You are nothing but a puppet of your own broken ideals. There is no god who can defeat me. With a single strike, Naruto shattered the remaining bodies of Pain, and confronted Nagato, the true man behind the mask. Nagato, now weakened from his use of the Rinnegan's powers, tried to beg for his life, offering Naruto a chance to join him in his quest for peace. Peace. Naruto scoffed. There is no peace in a world that is broken beyond repair. You, like the others, are just blind to the truth. You think I'm the problem? No. It's your ideals that are the problem. With a brutal series of punches, Naruto ended Nagato's reign, severing the last remnant of the Akatsuki's leadership. As Nagato's body crumbled, Naruto turned his back, already focused on the next stage of his journey. The Akatsuki falls. One by one, the Akatsuki fell in the face of Naruto's relentless march. Kisame, the shark-faced rogue from the hidden mist, attempted to challenge him with his sword, Samehada, and the power of the 7 ninja swordsmen. But even Kisame's ability to absorb chakra was no match for Mahoraga's adaptation, and the battle ended with Kisame's swift defeat. Naruto's vision of a new world, free from the tyranny of the Akatsuki and the corrupt systems that had controlled the shinobi world for so long, was becoming a reality. And as each member of the Akatsuki fell, one by one, the world grew darker and more uncertain. The only certainty left was that Naruto's power was unparalleled. Naruto's declaration. In the aftermath of the Akatsuki's fall, Naruto stood alone at the heart of the battlefield, surrounded by the ruins of the once proud organization. His eyes burned with the fire of a man who had seen the true nature of the world and had no intention of changing course. "I am the only one who can remake this world," Naruto declared to the heavens, his voice echoing across the silent land. "None of you know God, no ideal can stop me now." With the Akatsuki crushed, Naruto continued his campaign, unopposed and unstoppable. No power could stand against him, and soon, the 5 great nations would be in his grasp. The war against the world had only just begun. Naruto's war against the 5 great nations escalated into a brutal, one-sided conflict. With each battle, he demonstrated the invincibility of his power, and the Kage once revered as the strongest warriors in the world could only watch in helplessness as their nations crumbled. No amount of strategy, power, or diplomacy could save them from Naruto's relentless onslaught. The shinobi world was in disarray. The fall of the Raikage, the hidden cloud. The first to fall was the hidden cloud, where the 4th Raikage, A, and his brother, Killer B, attempted to put up a united front. The Raikage, known for his lightning-fast speed and immense strength, clashed head-on with Naruto in an open field. The battle began with a flurry of lightning-infused attacks, but Naruto, ever adaptable, easily countered. The Raikage's signature lariat attack, an immense tackle infused with lightning, was rendered completely ineffective as Mahoraga's will swiftly adapted to the speed and intensity of the attack. Naruto dodged effortlessly, then retaliated with a devastating punch that sent the Raikage hurtling through the air, crashing into the earth with an impact that shattered the ground beneath them. "This is the might of the Raikage," Naruto taunted, stepping forward as the fallen leader struggled to stand. "You are nothing." Despite A's desperate efforts to summon Lightning Release, Lightning Beast mode to counter Naruto's overwhelming power, Mahoraga adapted to the electrical assault, nullifying it entirely. With a single thrust of his hand, Naruto shattered the Raikage's defenses, forcing him into submission. Killer B attempted to use his Baijuyo, the 8 tails, but even that was futile. Naruto's absolute power proved too much, and soon, the hidden cloud's defenses were shattered. The Raikage lay on the ground, defeated, while Naruto crushed the symbol of the lightning village beneath his heel. "Your time is over," Naruto declared coldly, leaving the village in ruins. The fall of Tsuchikage, the hidden stone. Next was the hidden stone, where Oniki, the 3rd Tsuchikage, stood as the last defense of his land. Oniki, a master of earth release and the wielder of the particle style, one of the deadliest techniques known, was considered a living legend, capable of destroying mountains with his jutsu. But Naruto's adaptation was beyond anything Oniki could have prepared for. Oniki's first attack was a massive particle style, atomic dismantling jutsu, which had the power to obliterate anything it touched. Yet Mahoraga, ever evolving, adapted to the atomic level destruction and absorbed the attack without even flinching. Oniki's face twisted in disbelief as his strongest technique failed to leave a mark on Naruto. Naruto stepped forward, his expression cold and merciless. "Is this the best you can do, Tsuchikage?" Oniki tried to use his flight technique to gain the high ground, but Mahoraga adapted to the shifting gravitational forces, allowing Naruto to launch himself into the air without effort. With a single, crushing strike, Naruto overwhelmed Oniki, breaking through his defenses and sending the Tsuchikage crashing back to the earth below. Despite his age and experience, Oniki had nothing left to give. "The shinobi world is crumbling," Oniki muttered weakly, realizing his inevitable fate. "And there's no stopping you." Naruto offered no response, simply raising his fist to crush the hidden stone symbol. Onaki's final moments were marked by the destruction of the village, and the fall of another cage. The fall of the Mizu cage, the hidden mist. In the hidden mist, Mei Terumi, the fifth Mizu cage, awaited Naruto's arrival with a strategy built around her powerful lava and boil release techniques, which were capable of melting and dissolving anything they touched. But again, Mahoraga's adaptive nature rendered her techniques useless. Mei's acid-covered attacks and boiling lava cascades met their match in the unyielding force of Mahoraga, whose adaptation neutralized them before they could land a blow. Naruto confronted Mei with an air of superiority. You can try your best, but in the end, it's futile. Your ideals can't protect your people from me. Mei's battle with Naruto was fierce, but she couldn't match the raw power of his abilities. The lava release, melting apparition was neutralized, and even her boil release, unholy resurrection was adapted to by Mahoraga, rendering the attack harmless. Her last-ditch attempt to summon the 5 Kiri blades ended in failure as Naruto effortlessly overpowered her, his strikes breaking through her defenses and landing critical blows. With Mei defeated, Naruto obliterated the symbol of the hidden mist, leaving nothing but smoke and ash in his wake. The fall of the Hokage, the hidden leaf. Finally, the village that had once called him a demon, the hidden leaf, stood as the last bastion of the old order. The fifth Hokage, Tsunade, stood ready to defend the village against Naruto's onslaught, alongside the elite forces of Konoha. But Tsunade's medical ninjutsu and monstrous strength could not stand against the vast power of Mahoraga. Tsunade's attempts to use strength of 100 seals failed when Mahoraga adapted to her chakra flow, nullifying her enhanced strength. The entire village fought back with everything they had. Sasuke and Sakura, the remaining members of Team 7, joined the defense, but it was no use. Sasuke's Chidori and Amaterasu couldn't land a hit, and Sakura's strength of 100 couldn't match Naruto's overwhelming might. In a brutal confrontation with Tsunade, Naruto delivered a crushing blow to the Hokage, knocking her unconscious before turning to the village. With a cold, dispassionate gaze, Naruto saw the last of the great nations trembling before him. This village, like the rest, is nothing but a relic of a broken system, Naruto said, his voice filled with disdain. It's time for a new world. With that, Naruto destroyed the symbol of the hidden leaf, erasing the last vestige of the old order. The world falls silent. The 5 great nations had fallen, their cage defeated, their once proud villages reduced to ruins. As Naruto stood atop the broken remnants of the shinobi world, he felt a strange calm wash over him. I've done it. I've shattered the system, Naruto thought, his heart cold and unfeeling. Now, there was no one left to challenge him. The world had been remade in his image, a world that would bend to his will. The war against the old system was over, and the world awaited its new ruler, the one who would shape it from the ashes of the past. And in this new world, no one, not even a god, could stand against Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who had become unstoppable. The Otsutsuki clan, an ancient and powerful race of beings who have manipulated the world's fate for centuries, took notice of Naruto's rise to power. His destruction of the 5 great nations and the old shinobi system had not gone unnoticed. They saw him as a threat to the cosmic balance they had meticulously crafted, a disruption that could unravel their control over the world. Thus, the Otsutsuki made their move. The first encounter, Momoshiki and Kinshiki. Momoshiki Otsutsuki, a towering figure of immense power, along with his loyal guard Kinshiki, descended from the heavens to challenge Naruto. Their arrival in the world was nothing short of apocalyptic. The sky darkened as they appeared, their chakra radiating an aura that could tear apart mountains. Momoshiki's Byakugan allowed him to see Naruto's chakra network, but Mahoraga's adaptation made his efforts futile. Every technique Momoshiki unleashed was countered. His chakra absorption was useless against Mahoraga's ability to evolve and adapt, rendering it powerless. Kinshiki, armed with his massive club and lightning-fast reflexes, tried to land a strike on Naruto, but Mahoraga's constant adaptation to their techniques kept the attacks from landing. In an instant, Naruto overwhelmed Kinshiki with devastating force, crushing his opponent with a single, precise blow. He then turned his focus to Momoshiki, whose arrogance and underestimation of Naruto's power led to his downfall. "You think you can change the course of fate?" Naruto said coldly, his eyes burning with the same indifference that had marked his entire journey. Momoshiki's chakra beam came at Naruto with the force of a comet, but Mahoraga adapted, absorbing the energy and sending it back with catastrophic force. Momoshiki's body was shattered, his once invincible form crumbling under the weight of his own power, unable to overcome the unstoppable force of Naruto's evolution. "Fate? I create my own," Naruto said as Momoshiki's body crumbled to dust. The second encounter, Itachi at Otsutsuki. Itachi at Otsutsuki, the last of the immediate clan members sent to confront Naruto, was far more dangerous than his predecessors. A being of incredible power, Itachi had mastered the art of space-time ninjutsu and could manipulate dimensions at will. His immense strength and ability to shrink objects and people into near-nothingness were a terrifying challenge, but Naruto was beyond mere challenges. Itachi's Daikokyuden technique, which allowed him to store and summon objects from another dimension, proved ineffective against Mahoraga's rapid adaptation. No matter what Itachi threw at Naruto, be it giant projectiles, crushing blows, or dimensional shifts, Naruto's will adapted to each and every move. Itachi's own dimension-based techniques, which had once overwhelmed even the strongest of opponents, faltered against Naruto's limitless power. The battle turned into a war of attrition as Itachi tried to force Naruto into a corner. However, each of Itachi's attacks was rendered useless as Mahoraga evolved faster than Itachi could even think. In a final, brutal exchange, Naruto adapted to Itachi's Vajra attacks and crushed the Otsutsuki with a blow that shattered his body and spirit. "Your reign is over, Itachi," Naruto said, his eyes burning with the weight of his victory. With Itachi defeated, Naruto looked to the heavens, knowing that the Otsutsuki clan had been tested, and their fate sealed by his own power. The final encounter, Kagaya at Otsutsuki. Kagaya at Otsutsuki, the progenitor of Chakra on Earth, the one who had once sought to control the world, now came to challenge Naruto. She arrived from her dimension, her ethereal presence causing the ground beneath her to tremble. Kagaya's abilities were legendary, controlling the very fabric of space-time, conjuring multiple dimensions, and even manipulating the power of the Shinja tree itself. Naruto, however, was no ordinary shinobi. His power, already beyond the limits of any mortal, was now so immense that Kagaya's dimensional abilities posed little threat to him. As soon as she attempted to open a portal to her dimension, Mahoraga's will adapted, creating a barrier that sealed the portal shut. Kagaya's attacks with chakra bones and ice style were rendered useless as Mahoraga adapted, neutralizing every single technique she threw at him. Kagaya attempted to imprison Naruto in her dimension, but Mahoraga's ability to evolve in response to external threats allowed Naruto to adapt, breaking free from her dimension's constraints. Her ability to manipulate chakra fruit and the power of the Shinja tree only seemed to fuel his power further. In a final act of desperation, Kagaya attempted to seal Naruto in an alternate dimension where time and space were altered beyond recognition, but Mahoraga's adaptation nullified this last-ditch effort. Kagaya found herself trapped in her own dimensional prison. The very techniques she had once used to control the world now turned against her. "You were nothing but a pawn in a game you could never understand," Naruto said, his voice full of disdain as Kagaya's form crumbled into nothingness. "This world belongs to me now." Naruto sealed Kagaya in her own dimension, ensuring that her influence would never reach the mortal realm again. He stood atop the ashes of her ambitions. The last of the Otsutsuki felled. A new world. With the Otsutsuki destroyed and their ancient plans thwarted, Naruto stood as the uncontested ruler of the world. The last obstacle in his way had been removed, and there were no more forces left capable of challenging him. The shinobi world, once fractured and ruled by warring factions, was now under his control. Nations had crumbled, the old power structures destroyed, and Naruto, his power now unparalleled, was the only god who remained. The world no longer bent to the will of the Great Kage or the Otsutsuki, it bent to him. A new world, Naruto muttered to himself, standing alone amidst the ruins of his past. My world. No longer bound by the laws of destiny, the whims of the gods, or the desires of the weak, Naruto had carved his own path. He had destroyed the system, defeated every enemy, and ascended beyond the realms of mortals. The shinobi world was his to shape, and in this new world, there would be no more bloodshed, only the cold, unyielding reign of a god. The world had been reshaped, torn apart and rebuilt under Naruto's rule. The once proud shinobi nations now lay in ruins, their leaders defeated and their power structures dismantled. But there was still one final challenge left in Naruto's path: Sasuke Uchiha. The once promised rival, the brotherly bond that had existed between them shattered long ago, now stood at the precipice of their final confrontation. Sasuke had spent years honing his abilities, embracing the power of the Rinnegan and the Sharingan, and had developed a new form of strength that could rival even Naruto's godlike power. He was determined to avenge his clan, defeat his former friend, and take control of the world himself. But Naruto's growing disillusionment with the system and his brutal conquest of it had transformed him into something far beyond what Sasuke had once known. The stage is set. The two met on a barren battlefield, the once vibrant forests of Konoha now reduced to ashes in the wake of Naruto's campaign. The air was thick with tension, the sky darkened by the echoes of their past battles and shared history. Sasuke stood, his Rinnegan glowing ominously, his Sharingan flaring to life, its eternal Mangekyo form locked in a fierce, burning gaze. Sasuke, Naruto, this ends today. His voice was calm but cold, his resolve steely. The weight of everything he had lost and everything he had become hung heavily on his shoulders. In Sasuke's mind, only one could stand at the pinnacle of the shinobi world. Naruto, you think you can stop me? You think you can change this world? You failed before, and you'll fail again. His eyes, glowing with a feral intensity, locked onto Sasuke. Despite everything, there was a flicker of something in Naruto's heart. The past the bond they had shared was still there, but it was now consumed by a cold, unyielding hunger for power. Let's see who the world belongs to. The battle unleashed. The moment Sasuke moved, the world seemed to tremble. His Chidori crackled with energy, his Amaterasu flames lighting the battlefield with scorching intensity. Sasuke's Kirin came next, a storm of lightning unleashed with such ferocity that it threatened to decimate the entire area. But Naruto, his body surrounded by the swirling will of Mahoraga, adapted to each and every technique Sasuke threw at him. The Amaterasu flames failed to touch him as Mahoraga's will absorbed the heat and turned the flames back on themselves. Sasuke's Chidori cracked against Naruto's skin, only for the energy to dissipate harmlessly, his Chidori reduced to nothing as Mahoraga's will shifted to counter its electrical charge. Sasuke unleashed his Tsukuyomi, an attempt to trap Naruto in an infinite illusion, but even this, one of the most powerful genjutsu in the world, faltered against Mahoraga's power. Mahoraga's will adapted to Sasuke's genjutsu, nullifying its effects and allowing Naruto to remain untouched by the illusion. Sasuke, his eyes glowing with desperation and rage, activated his Rinnegan, unleashing the full power of the Chibuku Tensei, pulling the very earth beneath them into a massive gravitational pull. The massive rocks and debris were lifted into the sky, forming a massive sphere, but Naruto's adaptation rendered the technique ineffective. The gravity was neutralized, and the debris shattered upon impact with Naruto's aura. Sasuke's frustration grew as he summoned his final trump card, the Indra's Arrow, a colossal arrow of pure chakra designed to pierce even the most invulnerable of foes. The arrow surged through the air with unstoppable speed, but once again, Mahoraga's will adapted, growing more powerful with each passing moment. The arrow shattered as it collided with the evolving will, and in an instant, Naruto appeared before Sasuke. The final strike. Sasuke tried to strike back, his Amaterasu now coating his sword, but Naruto, faster than ever, reached Sasuke and slammed him into the ground with a single blow, his hand wrapped in Mahoraga's adaptive chakra. Sasuke's Rinnegan and Sharingan flared as he desperately tried to push Naruto away, but his body couldn't match Naruto's raw power. Sasuke, I will never forgive you for what you've done. But there was no longer any room for forgiveness in Naruto's heart. His once brotherly bond with Sasuke had been obliterated by years of pain, betrayal, and the cold embrace of power. Sasuke's strength could not match the evolved power of Mahoraga, which had adapted not only to every physical strike but to the very will behind Sasuke's attack. With one final, crushing blow, Naruto unleashed the full force of Mahoraga's will, and Sasuke was sent flying through the air, his body broken, bloodied, and battered. He crashed into the ground, gasping for breath, his Rinnegan flickering one last time. Victory and loss. Naruto stood above Sasuke, his breath steady and cold, eyes unwavering. The finality of the battle hung in the air. Sasuke's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, a fleeting hint of sadness passed between them. Sasuke, you were always the fool. Naruto, I was never the fool. I just saw the truth before you did. Sasuke's body trembled as he lay motionless, blood seeping from the wounds inflicted by Naruto's overwhelming power. His consciousness began to fade, his final thoughts consumed by the realization that he had failed once again. The world had changed, and Naruto had become its ruler. Naruto stood there, gazing at the crumpled form of his former comrade. There was no joy in his victory, only the cold certainty that he had won, that the world was now his to shape. The era of the shinobi has ended, Naruto whispered, turning his back to Sasuke's broken body. And the era of gods begins. With Sasuke defeated and the world at his feet, Naruto had finally proven that no one, not even the strongest of shinobi, could stand against his power. His will was unbreakable, and his path, though steeped in blood, had led him to the pinnacle of the shinobi world. The final battle with Sasuke had ended, and with it, any hope of resistance. The world was his to command. With Sasuke's defeat and the complete subjugation of the 5 great nations, Naruto stood alone at the pinnacle of power. There were no more enemies, no more resistance. The world, once teeming with chaos, war, and countless rivalries, now lay beneath his feet silent and broken. It was the dawn of a new era, one forged through bloodshed and willpower, but it was also a world that Naruto would control with absolute authority. The fall of the shinobi system. Naruto's first order of business was to completely dismantle the shinobi system that had defined the world for centuries. The hierarchy of kage, ninja villages, and the constant cycle of war and power struggles was abolished. No longer would nations wage wars against each other. No longer would the powerful dictate the fate of the weak. The system that had birthed so much suffering was cast aside in favor of a new, unified world under his rule. He declared that the era of shinobi had ended. The Shinobi Council was dissolved, and the 5 kage were erased from existence. In their place, Naruto established a single ruling entity, the Will of Change, an organization dedicated to overseeing his vision of the world. Naruto's power was absolute, and there was no one left to challenge it. His actions were swift and brutal. Dissidents were crushed, villages that resisted his rule were erased, and those who had once stood in opposition to his ideals were either brought into line or destroyed. Those who came willingly were granted a place in his new world, those who did not were eradicated, their lands and legacies erased as if they had never existed. Enforced peace. The world, once broken and fractured, was now united but at a great cost. Peace reigned, but it was not a peace born of harmony. It was a peace forced through Naruto's will, maintained through constant surveillance and overwhelming power. Naruto's rule was one of fear and order. Mahoraga's will, his ultimate symbol of control, adapted to every potential threat, no matter how small, ensuring that nothing could ever disrupt his vision of peace. Any semblance of rebellion was snuffed out before it could even take root. But this peace, though unchallenged, came with a price. The freedom that once defined the shinobi world was no more. The people lived in a world where Naruto's voice was the only one that mattered, where dissent was crushed with brutal efficiency. It was a world where individuals could no longer aspire to greatness on their own terms. The system he had abolished had been cruel, yes, but it had also given birth to heroes, legends, and challengers. Now, there was only one. Naruto became the supreme authority, the God of Shinobi, as some whispered in the shadows. The whispers of a future where no one would be able to oppose him faded as quickly as they came. Anyone with enough power or influence to resist was swiftly dealt with. A new world order. The borders between the once powerful nations dissolved. Naruto's influence spread across the globe, and his authority was law. In the place of the cage, Naruto appointed loyal followers, his closest allies, those who had served him during his rise, those who saw the world as he did. They were not rulers, but enforcers of his will, ensuring that his laws were carried out without question. In the center of the newly formed village, now simply known as the Wheel, Naruto built a palace, a symbol of his reign. It stood as a monument to his victory and his vision of the future. Inside, the Wheel's inner circle discussed the direction of the world, but Naruto's word was final. There was no need for debate, his path was the only one that mattered. The old shinobi villages that once thrived with unique cultures and traditions were replaced by a standardized world of uniformity. The way of the ninja was no longer celebrated, those with chakra abilities were now monitored, their every move tracked. Ninja techniques that had once been revered were now tools to maintain order, controlled and standardized for the greater good of the world. A world without conflict. Naruto's world was peaceful, but it was an eerie peace. The streets of former villages were now filled with silent citizens, their lives dictated by the iron fist of Naruto's law. Those who had once fought for ideals and freedom now lived in a world where freedom was no longer needed because there was no one left to challenge the rules. But even in this world of peace, there were whispers. Whispers of the cost of such peace. The people, though subdued, carried the weight of Naruto's decisions in their hearts. There were no more wars, no more battles to fight, no more heroes to rise. The shinobi system had been eradicated, but at what cost? Would the world remain unchanged, or would the cycle of ambition and resistance begin anew? Naruto's vision. As he stood atop the balcony of his palace, overlooking the world he had remade, Naruto's thoughts were cold and calculated. He had achieved his goal, he had torn down the world that had broken him, and in its place, he had built something stronger, something unyielding. But the weight of his power was heavy. Naruto had never been one to seek peace for peace's sake. He had sought control not because he desired to rule, but because he believed that only under his vision could the world truly be free of chaos and suffering. His peace was absolute, but it was one that would last as long as he remained at the top. In his mind, this was the only way to ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. He had done it. He had brought down the corrupt system and forged a new world. Now, with no one left to oppose him, the only question that remained was whether or not the world could truly be happy under such a ruler, or if, in the end, his reign would become the very thing it sought to destroy. For Naruto Uzumaki, the god of shinobi, there was only one truth that mattered: the world now belonged to him. And with that truth came the understanding that no one, no matter their strength, would ever stand against him again.